Welcome to OmTimes TV, a division of OmTimes Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OmTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. According to a recent article published on the BBC's website, the COVID crisis, together with its long-haul recovery challenges, is binding together a group of trends that point to a renewed appreciation of and a yearning for a simpler, more natural way of life. Apparently, that's not unusual. History shows that whenever humanity reaches an important pivot point and life becomes uncertain, our human instinct is to retreat to the safety of the natural world, seeking not just physical security, but also mental and emotional well-being. And why wouldn't we? The fact is, we're an indelible part of nature, and without its wisdom and support, we could never have survived as a species. Few people I've met know this better than quantum plant alchemist, healer, bard, and curandero Davyd Farrell, who's devoted many years to extensive study and training in the fields of herbalism, geomancy, shamanism, dowsing, earth energies, plant consciousness, and plant spirit healing. Davyd Farrell joins us now to share why creating a closer relationship with the elemental forces of nature, quantum plant, tree, and fungi intelligence can be especially useful to us all right now. Davyd, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Sandie. Lovely to be back. Lovely to be chatting with you again. And I know this is a topic that's very important to both of us. Of course, my life is really about plants and trees and nature, but I know that you love these things too.
Yeah. And I think we all do. We just forget to acknowledge that. We learn to take it for granted, which is the last thing we should be doing, especially now. On your new website, you say this is a time of great transition as the old paradigm falls away and a new earth is ushered in. As humans become more sovereign and reclaim their health for themselves, a new type of internal technology is coming online, one that can be enhanced in co-creation with nature and plants. Tell me more about this internal technology.
Well, it's a kind of a big question, and I'm wondering where is the best place to start. But perhaps we can start to think about the inner world and how we connect with ourselves. How do we connect with our body? How do we connect with the non-physical aspects of ourselves? How do we connect with what we ordinarily would call our aura or our energy field, but what we're now starting to call our personal terrain? And, you know, this being that's sat here is not just one person. It's not just Davyd Farrell. There are a million beings or more in this meat bag, this spacesuit, however we want to describe ourselves, you know, in the blood and the organs. And so in the end, you know, I guess one of the questions I've been asking myself over the last few years is who is Davyd exactly? Which bit of Davyd is here? Is it in here? Is it up there? Is it somewhere in here? And, you know, that journey really started to happen probably about 6 or 7 years ago when I returned to Britain after being overseas for many years and suddenly got really ill really quickly. Started losing weight, had terrible body pains, and a whole bunch of stuff was kind of kicking off, you could say, really. And that kind of startling experience brought to my awareness all of these other beings who were kind of screaming at me, saying, hey, where's the captain of the ship? The boat's kind of rudderless. There's nobody steering the boat anymore. And how come nobody's looking after us in here? And, you know, it was a shocking experience for me, for someone who's always been very sporty, athletic, to suddenly find that I couldn't move my neck, I couldn't move my shoulders. I was in pre-season football training with a local village team, having terrible pains in my ankles. I couldn't walk and basically got bedridden in my early 40s for a while and couldn't work out what was going on. So that prompted, I guess what I would say is the journey into my body. And I started looking much more closely, and I have to hold up my hands and say I didn't even know where all of my organs were exactly, which seems kind of embarrassing now. But I suspect I'm not the only person like that. You know, and whether we're disconnected from ourselves, you know, that kind of leads us on to the next bit, which is what you introduced with, really is about the disconnection from nature and forgetting that we are part of nature. We are part of the fractal organic experience that is natural. And, you know, at a time when we are faced with many existential questions about the nature of humanity, the nature of gender, the nature of intelligence, natural intelligence, artificial intelligence, many people talking about a bifurcation, possibly even a trifurcation of humanity. And with the very powerful astrology we have at the moment, I think this is going to be one of the big questions of 2023 and 24, and maybe even for the next 5 to 10 years, is how do we view ourselves, either as a natural organism or maybe part natural, part artificial, or maybe completely artificial. You know, everybody has a choice. And I think here on the planet of free will, that's always worth remembering. And maybe sometimes other people's choices don't always make sense to us. But for me personally, it's always been about the natural, organic, fractal experience. And, you know, like I was saying, once I started this journey into my body, it started to open up doorways to other things. It actually really started to enhance my psychic abilities too, which had always been there. And after spending time in Ecuador as well, training with my Quechua shaman, working with the plants of tobacco, ayahuasca and Wayusa, that kind of really helped clear my field more. And it started the journey of understanding that in order to be able to see better into myself, to see better into the astral realms, I needed to clean myself up. And, you know, I know we're going to talk a little bit about some of the immersions that we've been running here and the sequence. But there are definitely plants like the Artemisias that are very, very good at cleaning up the dark, dusty recesses of our personal terrain, or what we might call the shadow sometimes. And, you know, as we shift from the old paradigm timelines into the new earth timelines, or the golden timeline even, it's imperative that we clean our fields up and we release the heavy, gunky material, which, you know, it has a physical, it has a non-physical astral aspect to it, but then by default will always manifest into the physical body, normally as sludge in our liver or our kidneys or dirty blood or so many things. And, you know, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot, and I know that you've connected with my friend Rebecca O'Reilly, the nutritionist, about this, and this is a big thing that we talk about a lot together on our show, Food as Medicine, is detoxing. Heavy metal detoxing, especially. In the end, my journey with the body led me to Rebecca, and I did a 2-month detox with her back in 2021. And for the first time in my adult life, I was pain-free. And what I didn't know was that I'd had activated Epstein-Barr virus most of my adult life. And that then took me on another journey into heavy metals and poisons, and realizing that as a youngster, I was quite heavily poisoned. I think with lead, which had graphene in it. And graphene is another big piece that's going on right now. It's a big part of what's affecting many people's energy fields. And as a healer, as a quantum plant alchemist, and working in the astral space remotely, I see lots of clients' energy fields, and I kind of say that's my new service in many ways. It's a good way of me taking the pulse on where the collective is at. And of course, we've had many new experiences passed on to the collective over the last couple of years. And as somebody who looks into the energy fields of people, I can see very, very clearly the effects of many things that have happened to us over the last couple of years. But the one I think is most important is heavy metal poisoning. You know, it's everywhere. And I know that me and you have talked about this personally off camera before. And I think it's actually something that's pretty much affecting most Westerners, and has been utilized over the last couple of years to engender situations and symptoms and a whole bunch of other stuff. And again, you know, I was talking to Rebecca about this a while ago, and I was asking about why so many children get eczema, because she says that, you know, that eczema is a cause of heavy metal poisoning. She said, well, why do you think? She said, you know, in our mother's wombs, unfortunately, because of the knock-on effect of genetics in the Industrial Revolution, many of our mothers' and grandmothers' womb spaces were also contaminated with heavy metals. And so many of us are born actually semi-poisoned. And it's, again, no judgment on our mothers or our grandmothers. It's just a side effect, I guess you can say, of the Industrial Revolution sort of 200 years ago, and it's still with us. And so, you know, in order to start receiving the plasma, the great light that's kind of coming onto the planet at the moment, there has to be space in the vehicle, you know, for it to be received. And if that space is already full, you know, I love the Buddhist analogy they use of the glass vase, and you know, let's say you leave a nice crystal glass vase outside, and over time it gets filled with dirt and sludge, and after a while it's not a glass vase anymore, it's just a dirty vessel. And they use that as an analogy of how to look at ourselves. And once we start the inner work and we start cleaning, we start to see that it's no longer a dirty vessel, it's actually a clear crystalline glass vase. And you know, that ultimately I think is where we're trying to get to ourselves, to be in that kind of crystalline transparent state, or as the elder mother, the elder tree would say, to become the hollow bone, you know, so that we can really channel not necessarily extraterrestrials or higher dimensional beings, but mostly our own higher dimensional self. And, you know, that I really believe is where we are heading right now, if we choose. It's only one pathway, and there are many other pathways people can choose. But how do we start to develop that inner physician, as my friend Paul Strode would call it? It's like, how do we start to engage on the inner planes, and understanding that we are all uniquely built to be a self-regenerating system. We all have the inner toroidal field that works up through the central channels, through the chakras, to our soul star chakra at the top and our earth star chakra at the bottom. And for anyone who's seen the donut kind of shape of the toroidal field, we are all of these in the same way that each tree out there is.
Yes. And
the more that we get that idea that we are a self-regenerating, self-replenishing system, the more we start to understand that we are already sovereign. All that has to change is the mindset in the emotional plane, so that we realize that we can't be manipulated through our emotional traumas, which is how I would dare to suggest that we have been manipulated and controlled for a long time. So, you know, engaging with that inner space, I think it is the first step on that path.
You know, thinking today, I've been thinking about what we're going to talk about. And when you think how many millennia, you know, humans have been on this planet, and how many millennia we have turned to nature to heal ourselves and nourish ourselves. And really, it's only like the last couple of 100 years or so that we have moved towards a different kind of way of looking at our bodies, separating everything, you know, pharmaceuticals, all of the synthetic stuff. But in that 200-year period, boy, have we done a lot of damage.
Well, you know, I often refer to the wonderful book by the now sadly passed Barbara Griggs, but The New Green Pharmacy is really a history of the two different types of medicine, the Western medicine, allopathic, and, you know, maybe in the past called quackery. And on the other side, we have the more natural plant medicine path. And of course, some of our ancient elders, the likes of Nicholas Culpeper, were very good at working with plants in that way. But he had a hard time in his day too, you know. There's often been this kind of, how to say, it goes back to the Roman times. In fact, Barbara tracks it back to the Roman times in the introduction, particularly in the Middle Ages, of all kinds of metals and quackery, which, like mercury, for example, right? You know, laudanum, so many things that we were given to put into our bodies and told that this is the newest, most fandangled medicine out there because it's come from some far-off land that you're probably not going to be able to pronounce, and we can absolutely pull the wool over your eyes with this one. Unfortunately, that's no longer possible. You know, whatever we might think about the internet in recent years, it has allowed many of us to communicate with each other and start breaking down some of these spells that have been cast on us about Western medicine. And particularly, again, over the last couple of years, I feel that that's really been brought to a head, and certainly a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about that. But, you know, the choice, I think, comes down to whether we engage with the New Green Pharmacy, the back garden pharmacy, the nature pharmacy, in a sovereign way that's in a co-creative experience with the plant beings that we're working with, or do we go to somebody else who apparently knows more about us than we know about ourselves, and we allow them to give us some sort of medication or process that we really don't have an awful lot of knowledge about? And I think that that's really one of the things that we're going to start to see change in the coming, hopefully in the coming weeks and months, but certainly in the coming years, of understanding that we don't have to outsource. I remember Philip Cargon, the former druid of chief druid of Obod in Britain, he used to say, you know, what is it that's happened in the last 10 years? We've got into this place of outsourcing. We outsource our ability to remember telephone numbers to the contact book in our phone. We outsource our ability to read maps and work out where we are to the sat nav in the phone. But we also outsource our sense of health to somebody else. And, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. And of course, sometimes we need to go to specialists, particularly surgeons. But even then, my plant allies often tell me, it's like, try not to remove anything from the physical body, because once it's gone, we can't repair it. But if you leave it in the body with the right causes and conditions and the right energetic dynamics, we can pretty much regenerate anything, which I think is very interesting. And of course, you have to take each and every case on individual merit. But I've been trying to work with this for a long time now. And having had, operations on my left knee, my meniscus, and having had bits of me taken out, and understanding that once they're gone, they're never really going to repair quite the way they were. But also now with, the advent of quantum ideas, even things like med beds possibly, as and when those appear, we can start to think about how to regenerate parts of ourselves. And if we're able to go inwards and actually see maybe blockages in the blood or blockages in the meridian lines, and we have the understanding that at a quantum level, i.e. with intention, but with the right surgeons, the right assistants, which is how I really see a lot of my plant allies, we can work in a cooperative way to start to repair those aspects of our physical self. And again, if you think about this, and this is something I've been sharing a lot, because so many humans try to create in 3D outwards, and the trick is not. It's like we actually create in the 5D through the emotional realms into the 3D. This is the place of manifestation. So whatever is going on in our body, like in the case of disease or maybe cancers or tumors, these have an energetic counterpart, which is the original origin point. And so if we start to change things around and start to look at the origin point in the energetic realms, and we remove the energetic trauma or whatever the situation is in that space, then by default, the physical body has to follow suit by default. There's no other thing that it can do. It can't exist in some other kind of time-space continuum where the energetic effects didn't happen. But this is something that I think is very, very new information for many people. Of course, the ancestors and the elders, particularly in indigenous communities, those working with plant medicines, knew a lot of this kind of stuff in their own way. They probably would have had a different lexicon or language to explain it. But this is where the plants come in. And it's, I've been blessed enough over the last decade or more to be able to work with many different great teachers, human teachers, who introduced me to working with many different plants, people like Pam Montgomery and Carol Guy, who've written wonderful books about plant spirit healing and sacred plant initiations. My teacher, Michael Dunning, the Yew shaman, who I studied the Yew Mysteries with for 5 years. And then, of course, my teacher in Ecuador too. So I've had many, many different human teachers that have helped connect me to the plants. But I'd really say over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really just been the plants that have been teaching me, because of the openness from my side to see plants as something more than just a beautiful little green thing that's growing in the cracks on the pavement, but to understand that this is a Buddha being. In the case of dandelion, who I know we're going to talk a little bit about in a minute, and a plant that we both like, but just to think about it simply, dandelion grows everywhere. He grows across the whole planet. He's able to give his medicine to virtually anybody. And not only is he able to give his medicine to virtually anybody, but because of his genetic skills, he is a master geneticist. He is actually able to change his own DNA at will to adapt to any environment. Now, when I start to think about this at a quantum level, this starts to blow my mind, because it's like, well, if he can do this for himself, maybe he can help me with this. Maybe he can help my clients with this. So that's really in some ways how the journey started many, many years ago, of not just thinking about plants as maybe like ayahuasca or sacred fungi that have this kind of mind-altering effect, but actually understanding that all medicine plants can have not just a mind-altering effect, but a full physical body, a holistic effect in a way that Western medicine isn't able to. Because in Western medicine, we're given medication that really is lifeless. There's no spirit in it. It's synthetic. But when we're working with a plant, we're working with an incredibly intelligent being, often star beings, that have come back to planet Earth and manifested as plants in order to share their wisdom, magic, and healing abilities with us. And for me, once that mindset started to become my normal mindset, it completely changed my view of many, many things, including the reality that I live in.
Yeah, you've raised an interesting point for me there. They hold a lot for us. What do we do for them?
Well, we put Roundup on them, we let our dogs pee on them, we mow them down with a strimmer, we do all of these wonderful things, and still they keep coming back. You know, this is one of the great gifts of Dandelion. A, is he's incredibly friendly, but B, he doesn't hold it against us. He doesn't, you know, say, hey, you guys have been waging Roundup war on me for the last 50 years. I don't think I'm going to give you my medicine anymore because I'm kind of done with all of this. No, he just keeps turning up. And I think that this, again, is the mark of what, from my Buddhist days, I would call a bodhisattva, a being who just keeps coming and giving their gifts without asking for anything. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't give something back, for sure. And when I'm making medicines or working with different plants, I will always make an offering. There's always absolute love, honor, and respect in my heart for the beings I'm working with, and an understanding for me personally that I'm some sort of ambassador or emissary for the wider plant world to share. Through these kinds of talks, through retreats that I used to run, through other podcasts, and through the immersions that we're now running at Quantum Plant Healing, is how to empower other people with the knowledge and wisdom of the plants, and to encourage people to start looking in their back garden for their medicines. You know, I know we've talked about this before, and it's a well-known adage, but pretty much everything that we need to be in peak condition will be growing within about 50 meters of our house. Maybe not if we're living in a concrete jungle in the city, but generally, if we're living just in a small space and we have a garden, you know. And I wondered about this for many years. And a wonderful South African, also now deceased, unfortunately, medicine man, was sharing an idea with me, which he then connected the gut flora in our stomach with the microbiomes in the soil growing in our garden, and suggested, which I totally resonate with and understand that this is how it works now, that at a quantum level, our body, our gut flora directly communicates with the microbiomes in the soil and gives instructions. It's like, wow, Davyd needs a little bit of the dandelion medicine right now. His liver's a little sludgy after a heavy winter. Let's bring the dandelions forth. You know, or maybe we need something else. Maybe we need yarrow, and suddenly our lawn is full of yarrow. But then for some reason, maybe the next year it's not. And I think that this is, again, one of the beautiful teachings of Dandelion from a more esoteric, energetical, quantum perspective, is he brings us very much into the present moment. And the reason he's able to do this is that he's also a master of time. He really shows us how to break down past, present, and future, and understand that the only thing that really exists is now. This is the only thing that truly exists. Everything else is something else. And when we get to that moment, that'll be the only thing that exists. But when we think about that, you know, really what he encouraged me to do was to slow down, to understand that every moment is divinely perfect, and to concentrate only what is happening to me in the moment, not to think about what happened last week, not to think about something that could be happening in 2 weeks that maybe does, maybe doesn't happen, but to really just be with myself in this moment. And the more that we do that, the more that we start to see the terrain around us in much more detail. And, you know, as a gardener also, when we're in the garden, we're fully focused on the plant, or at least we should be, whether we're potting, seeding, transplanting, pruning. It's a very engaged process. And I love that meditative aspect of my medicine work that brings me very much into the present moment. Because if I'm making a flower essence, I can't be thinking about the email that dropped in a little bit earlier in the day that bent me out of shape, or, you know, some disagreement I had with someone, because otherwise that goes into my medicine bottle. So, you know, there's all of these kinds of beautiful but subtle ways that the plants talk to us. And Dandelion really, I think, is showing this. I call him the architect of the 5D being that we're all moving towards. And the reason I say that is because he makes us very present. And by making us present and understanding that everything is divinely timed, even if something challenging comes up, it's like, well, this has come up for a reason. So rather than me try to avoid it, push it away, or whatever, you know, resist it, rather, it's just like, let it come towards me and let it move through me and let me transform it. And again, this is one of the beautiful teachings from the Yew Mysteries with Michael. We got taught how to be breathed by the horizon in, with the in-breath, and then back out. And in this way, we can see with peripheral vision everything coming towards us, and we just let it come in. We breathe it through, we transform it into whatever we think is the most appropriate forms. Normally, if it's something challenging, we need to heal or release something. And then we breathe it back out. In this way, there's no fuss, no loss of energy. We're just being very Tao about it, meeting the river as it flows towards us. And, you know, in this way, Dandelion taught me, he said, look, brother, we don't do stress in UF. And if you're stressed, you're not in UF. So you need to sit down, chill out for a bit and work out why you're stressed. And so I took this advice very much to heart and practiced with Dandelion with this, and realized that all of my stress was self-induced, often by self-induced deadlines or commitments that I'd signed up to. And once I started to realize that I was doing that to myself, and that once I stopped, I started to remove all of the stress from my life. And for sure, not every day is easy right now. But generally, that's my motto. So if I'm getting stressed, I need to sit down and ask myself why, and be present with myself and ask myself, what is it that I'm allowing to happen here that's causing this sensation for me? Because it doesn't need to be there. And, you know, the more that we move to a non-dual awareness, which really is a sort of a more fifth dimensional consciousness, we start to be able to sit on that beautiful eagle's perch that our friend Pam Gregory talks a lot about. And we're able to observe our emotional behavior much better. And, you know, once I started doing this more often, it's like, oh my God, like, why am I reacting like that to this? I don't really need to react like that, whatever the situation might be. And so that momentary pause, which again, if we do it more often, becomes a longer meditation on ourselves, we start to observe ourselves going around doing all of these actually slightly incoherent, crazy things, and getting triggered by all kinds of situations and reacting to them and making them worse, and then getting bent completely out of shape, and big drama unfolds. And next thing, we've lost a week of our life to whatever that situation was. And Dandelion's going, you didn't need to do it like that, buddy. You could have just sat down and chilled and meditated for 10 minutes and found a different solution. And so, you know, I think I prefer that way of being, to be honest, Sandie. It's become a lot less stressful, and it's also allowed me just to be very much in the place of surrender and acceptance. So whatever is happening is perfect. And that doesn't mean that I allow life to happen to me, not at all. I mean, anyone who's seen any of my podcasts or, you know, the work that me and Bella are doing at Quantum Plant Healing will see that we're very, very active. But also at the same time, there's that balance of like taking action, but also accepting that whatever is going to come up is what needs to come up. And you know, as we move to the end of the Kali Yuga, which I really feel we've just passed out of the birth canal finally, I felt Imbolc, the 1st of February, the beginning of February this year, the energy shifted after what was really quite a challenging winter. November, December, January, the astrology was hard for certainly many of us. But also at the same time, we were being encouraged, really, because we have to #forced evolution. We have to release the junk and gunk, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to get on that new Earth golden timeline and surf those waves. We're going to start to get pulled down under the water, and there's so much Piscean energy at the moment, and with Saturn about to move into Pisces. You know, we have to create that structure that allows us to be, you know, surfing, floating the oceans of consciousness. And, you know, I often talk about the past in the sense of the Lemurian otherworld as her story, the more masculine yang outward expression of his story. And now, you know, that we're moving beyond those two sort of more polarized ways of looking at things into our story. And I think that's a much more exciting way to look at things. And, you know, as we move forwards, it's about how do we remain a sovereign being, individualized. You know, this is the very yang experience in the more collective yin energies that maybe Lemur, the other world, have, which, you know, more elven, more hive mind. How do we have both at the same time? How do we remain ourselves, but connect to all of our brothers and sisters in the collective consciousness?
Well, we are being given, as I see it, an awful lot of help, because as all of the health systems are crumbling, which everybody is getting very anxious about and bemoaning, we're actually being given an opportunity to take control for ourselves. You know, I mean, really, prevention is better than a cure every time. And if, you know, if things are as close to us as our own back garden, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we?
Right, you know, and the thing is, once you engage with this idea, and if you manage to get past the terrible Western mind disease, which seems to feel the need to cut the lawn every 2 days, or to trim the hedges back, and you actually let your lawn grow for a few weeks, you might be quite surprised at what suddenly appears that you've never seen before. And that's where, you know, not only is it a journey of health and you know, claiming back our health sovereignty, but also it becomes an adventure to see like what grows in the garden, and why has yarrow suddenly grown in abundance? Do I need yarrow? So, you know, this is where we start to have this very extended conversation with the environment around us, and we start to remember that we are part of nature, and that this conversation going on with my gut flora directly with the soil in my back garden is now bringing up a range of plants. As it turns out, oh my gosh, I needed all of these plants. Yeah. So this is just, you know, the magic really kicks in for me.
Yeah, I have a friend who has had a Russian gardener, and he used to tell her that if you move into a house, do not touch anything in the garden for 6 months. At the end of that 6 months, you will find that the plants that are growing there will be different, and they will be the plants for you. And I found that absolutely fascinating. But we need to go to a break now, and then when we come back, we can start talking about some of the very simple, plants that you're working with in your immersions. So I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. You're listening to What Is Going On, and my guest today is geomancer, curandero, quantum plant alchemist, shaman, and co-founder of Wisdom Hub TV, Davyd Farrell, who's sharing his prodigious knowledge of quantum plant healing and how plants like dandelion, elder, yew, nettle, and many others can help us heal ourselves and heal the land. We'll be back in a few moments. Stay tuned.
OmTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OmTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OmTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OmTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OmTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OmTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OmTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OmTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Davyd Farrell, I am fascinated by the idea that plants can help guide us through this transition. And I know that you have a series of plant immersions. Tell me how this came about? How did you choose the plants, or did they tell you that they wanted to be chosen? And what actually happens in an immersion? How would it benefit me?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Sandie. Good question. So, I guess in the old days, we used to meet over a long weekend. This is how I learned to do plant diets or dietas originally with my teachers, Pam and Carol. We'd meet over a weekend, we'd choose a plant, maybe hawthorn, yarrow, we'd make a special brew, and the whole group would sit and drink that. We'd immerse ourselves together as a group. But, with what's happened over the last couple of years, it's become much more difficult to do that. And so, even if I'm not a huge fan of the tech, I have to say that, mechanisms like Zoom have enabled us to connect globally in a way that I didn't expect. And what's been really interesting is that over the last sort of 10 months, really, with the assistance of both Dandelion and the Ascended Master, Zachariah Tamelby, our friend Janet Trelawa, as it turns out that those two beings, Dandelion and Zach, are actually good friends. And, they were both talking to me at the beginning of last year. Zach in channel sessions, but Dandelion with me in person. And Dandelion particularly was encouraging me to change my opinion about how to reach people, because he really wanted to reach out. And it's funny, when I first started training with Pam Montgomery many years ago, she actually said that Dandelion had already stepped forward. This must be almost a decade ago now, I think, as one of the plants that was stepping up to help us in the transition to becoming homoluminescent beings, or much more filled with light. And so I sat with this for a while, and at the time, I just had arrived in Mexico, and I wasn't really in the right state of mind myself, wasn't really with the right resources. The internet connection where I wasn't good. And so the idea kind of started to formulate, but didn't come to anything. I then met my now partner, Bella, and we formed Quantum Plant Healing. And Dandelion stepped forward and said, okay, now's the time to co-create a template where we can create an online space within the quantumplanthealing.com website. And so working with our excellent web manager, we've managed to create somehow, and I'm still marveling at this really, a sort of a quantum plant healing tribe that works through energetic containers that we've created within the Quantum Plant Healing website. And so when we start an immersion, it's really the same as holding, well, for me anyway, as a space holder and as a medicine man. All I had to do was shift my sort of thinking from how to hold space in person as to how to hold space online. And, over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to run many online, big discussions and do a lot of communicating through these mechanisms. And so really it was just a case of starting to understand how to empower people to do a dieta process or a diet process or an immersion process with a plant as part of a group, but on an individual basis wherever they are in the world. And so then really what happened was that Dandelion stepped forward, said, I want to show you a way of doing this, and gave us the original template. And then at the same time, I was given a sequence of plants all at once, really. They're all trees and plants that I know quite well. But as the process unfolded, it became clear as to why these beings had stepped forwards. And so the sequence was Dandelion, followed by the Artemisias, which include some of our very favorite plants, mugwort and wormwood. Then the next tree in the sequence was the elder mother, Sambucus nigra, the elder tree. And then finally, in the original sequence was the tree of eternity, Yggdrasil, the yew tree, the oldest living being on the planet. And it was made very clear to me that this was going to be a rapid fire series of immersions last year. It wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be quite challenging, in fact. But there was a reason on a time scale why a group of us had to go through this process to, at least in some ways, and particularly this happened with the Artemisia immersion, was to create not the 100th monkey effect, as we used to call it, but the 100th person effect. And that is that, through doing particularly the Artemisia immersion, which was the first really full power one we did that was much more about healing, and also combined much more strongly another element I want to talk about, which is Mayan magic. But we had over 100 people on a live 13-day wave spell, which was the container for the immersion, all over the planet, every single continent apart from Antarctica. We had different people holding space. And because we had so many people, we were able to create a green, energy line. Many people work with the dragon lines or the crystal lines, but by working with the dragon plants, really, of the energy world, the Artemisias, you think about moxibustion and Chinese mugwort's ability to push chi around the body, it's the same thing. We can create energy lines and send chi and energy and impulses. And again, at the quantum level, this means that we can start to communicate telepathically in some ways too, but we can also send transmissions. So there were many sort of non-physical and physical aspects to this, but what was really beautiful was that through this process, we created a tribe that then has gone on a journey with us. And, through doing talks like this with yourself, or talks with people like Kelly Hunter or Pam Gregory, it's brought many, many astrologically minded people into the space, which is great because those people already understand correspondences, energy flows, archetypes. And when we're working with plants, all of those things are really, really important because, when we can understand correspondences and we can link things and see that everything is interconnected, then when we start connecting plants with astrology and saying, okay, if the astrology of the next few weeks is kind of geared more towards this energy flow or this type of healing, then we can start to match plants with those astrological movements and really, really start to create magic, but also do a lot of really powerful healing. And then if you add a 13-day Mayan wave spell into the equation as well, where every single day has its own energy, its own glyph, then it becomes really, really powerful. And what we're doing is we're fusing modalities. I don't think it's particularly new. I think our ancestors knew all about this, but we forgot about this somehow in the last couple of thousand years, or it was removed somewhat from our awareness. Of course, many indigenous communities all over the world have been able to stay connected to that, particularly obviously here in the Americas. But that's how the immersions started to come together. And what we understood from doing those sequence of 4 immersions, well, in the end there was 5, we had to include Yarrow as well. I'm just going to talk through them because people can still go and do the immersions now. In fact, many, many people have now gone in and done the dandelion immersion, because dandelion, as it turns out, is very much connected to the Sirius star system, very much connected to the zodiac sign of Leo, very much connected to the feline beings. You think about Diante de Leon, the dandelion's tooth, or dandelion. This is a being that carries that noble leonine energy of the heart. And so even though dandelion is a really good plant for cleansing the liver, what we came to understand from the immersion was that dandelion really wanted to get us into our heart and be present in the moment in our heart, because that means we have a much better chance of being connected to our higher self, because it's really through our heart that we connect to our higher self, and it's also through the heart that we connect to plants. We cannot connect to a plant intelligence through the lower mind, through the monkey mind. That guy has got way out of control in the Western world in the last few years because he got confused. We were led to believe that I think, therefore I am, and the brain is where we think from. So that is where everything begins and ends. And it's simply not true. The lower mind has an important function to help us get through every day, to help us work the equipment, to help us pick things. This is the part of us, or the being, in Chinese medicine, everything has its own intelligence, but the lower mind is the one that helps us get through the day. However, he's not so good at doing things like energy work and psychic work and connecting to non-physical energies. That's not his function. So the real brain is right here. But the point that Dandelion wanted to show us is that when we're in the present moment and we're not distracted, we're much more in our heart, and therefore we're able to connect to our higher selves much more easily, unless our field or our terrain is super distorted, contaminated, polluted, or manipulated. In which case then our central channel is not what Elder Mother wants, which is the hollow bone, but it's a bit of a mess. And so it's very difficult to really be able to be in touch fully with ourselves when we have attachments or unhelpful frequencies or energies that are distorting our field. So this is where the Artemisias came in, because they are very, very powerful plants for dealing with those kinds of non or unresolved burdens that no longer serve us. And without giving too much away, the Artemisias are very, very direct, and they will come in and they will immediately tackle the bits of your terrain that you haven't wanted to look at. And unfortunately, there's no easy way around this, but if we want to become much lighter beings, we have to get rid of the heavy stuff. We have to. It's, you'll know from, again, conversations with Pam, and I love what she says about this, that the frequencies are incompatible in the same space. Yeah. And as Zach wonderfully said on one of the pieces I did with him, you can see on the YouTube channel, we were talking about horsetail, which is quite an advanced plant, but very full of silica. And we understand that horsetail is a very, very old prehistoric being, or was here during the prehistoric times, but is really an extraterrestrial energy from a much more silica-based existence. But when we think about silica, that means that we have the opportunity to receive more light. But Zach warned me, he said, this is a plant for people who've done a lot of inner work already, because if they haven't, the plant's going to try and absorb more light into a dense system where it can't be received. So it could be a little physically uncomfortable. So, this is how we started to put together many different pieces. And so the Artemisias, we then understood, had to clean the terrain. So we had, but also the beautiful thing, if we think about dandelion, very yang, very out, very masculine in many ways, even that has that beautiful seed head that's very lunar. The Artemisias are much more sort of yin, inwards, Lemurian, emotional, etc. And so there was already a balance starting to come there with the masculine and feminine energies, the solar, lunar, yin and the yang energy. So the two sets of plants were really wanting to get us into a place of balance. We then moved to 2 trees. Now, elder is not necessarily a tree that grows very big. It's more of a hedge shrub kind of a tree, but it has this beautiful hollow stem that you can actually even make whistles and flutes from. And, if we understood that the dandelion being came from Sirius, and maybe the Artemisias are deeply connected to Black Moon Lilith, did a wonderful piece with Kelly Hunter about that you can see on the YouTube channel, but also perhaps more connected to the Anunnaki, part of our extraterrestrial DNA. We started to understand that due to her connections to the other world, particularly to the witchy qualities, as she is the ultimate master witch, the elder, and I say that with great reverence and respect to those lineages, you know, that she's from the sort of more Lemurian otherworld energy, and that started to get many of us in the immersion in the group thinking about where is she from. And so, you know, we don't know for sure, but we do have the idea that she's maybe a Pleiadian starseed mother who's been here a very, very long time, hence the reason by so many cultures she's recognized as the elder mother. You know, so she's also an incredibly good plant for helping to reveal the hidden or the unseen. When I'm doing clearings for clients, I work very strongly with two plants that are good at this, elder and wormwood. Wormwood really, really is the plant of truth that allows the third eye to open up and see everything. But elder is also the one that helps reveal any hidden energies or magics. And I feel like we're going to be talking about magic a lot in 2023 because the non-physical realms where magic is employed, mostly against us, or has been certainly over the last few years, is where we need to break down the spells and the lack of sovereignty that's been given to us. And so a wonderful being like Elder Mother shows us often, like, where is it that we're being manipulated by the unseen? But in the same token, she also really wanted us to find our truth. And this is where, having done the cleansing work with the Artemisias, getting our field clean, we can actually start to look inwards and engage with ourselves and ask the important questions: who am I and what am I doing here right now? You know, so what was super interesting about Elder was that she brought up a lot of stuff for all of us, myself included, in the throat chakra. Lots of gunk, lots of mucus coming from the sinuses for many people. And so what became very clear was that even if we had some idea of what our truth was, who we are, we weren't able to speak it. You know, you think about how much censorship there's been, how much, you know, shutting up of certain parts of perhaps even spiritual society or sectors over the last couple of years. And many of us have not been able to speak our truth. So then Yarrow came in and asked us to do a little mini immersion just for 5 or 6 days, really working with the throat chakra. But Yarrow has the mantra of, you know, intentional restraint. So Yarrow is, I mean, there's so much to say about Yarrow connected to Achilles and many, many things. But Yarrow really asks us to be super, super efficient in the use of our energy, but is also very good at working, clearing the throat chakra. And certainly I've done a lot of work with Yarrow over the last couple of years as I was doing more of this kind of interview work and really needing to get my throat and my expression and my words better, because, you know, when we think about Yarrow, Yarrow's holding the shaman chakra. The throat chakra is the shaman chakra because we're receiving the energetic input into our psychic chakra, the rear throat chakra. And if we're smart, we can hold that energy, that information here before we utter the word. The word is God and the word is a spell. And so, you know, I talk a lot about right thoughts, right actions, but also right words, because we create the reality around us by the words that we use. We also spell into existence everything going on around us to some extent. And so, you know, when we think about this and we think about the throat chakra, it really is starting to make us think much more about every single thing that we do. Again, dandelion. Be aware of yourself in every given moment, brother. And what are you doing right now? Are you just spouting forth a load of cobblers about something? Are you, you know, actually in your integrity right now? Or where are you going with all of this? So then that was Yarrow. And then finally we got to the world tree. So if the elder mother was the hollow bone for ourselves, the yew tree was asking us to become the toroidal field and to connect ourselves into our own toroidal fields, the toroidal field of the environment we live in, but also the toroidal field of Mother Earth. You know, and so once we start to think about this, then we start to get this more visual idea, and particularly if we're working with plants like wormwood, we can really start to see inwards and we can start to see the energetic effects. We also get super sensitive because once we clean the terrain out, for the first time, you know, many people I do clearings on say this, it's like, wow, it's like all of the voices stopped, all of the chatter stopped. And, you know, at the risk of, you know, sounding crazy, it's like many of us have these voices that are with us for a long time that are telling us to get angry, to get reacted and all of these things. And once we realize that those voices are actually coming from an external source and are not us going crazy, but are actually attachments, energetic attachments in our field, and we have those removed, what then happens is that we're able to start investigating our own traumas without them being manipulated or triggered by these attachments. And so this is a process of self-realization, self-mastery in the energetic realms. And, you know, this is a process that takes a while, but when we've got the plants to help us, and this is where dandelion, the artemisias, elder, yarrow, and yew say, look, we cannot simplify it any more than this. We're giving you the quickest, shortest way to start to engage with the process. And it could take you months, but the idea is that the plants show us how to get grounded, rooted, connected to ourselves, and to start opening our eyes to the reality of who we truly are. And, you know, we now have our next nettle immersion literally starting right now. And, you know, nettle is a plant that is another one of these very storied beings, like dandelion, like the artemisias. They've been with us for thousands of years. We have a lot of stories and mythology around them. And, you know, nettle is a plant that has a very strong warrior spirit, very connected to Mars, very connected to fire, but also at the energetic quantum level. You know, this is a plant that helped the Ascended Master Milarepa from Tibetan Buddhism get realized 20 years in the cave only drinking nettle tea. So this is a plant that, despite its fiery outward energy, at the inner level creates a sense of balance. It's an adaptogen. It's bringing us back into balance and equanimity. So despite its kind of fiery energy and it's got lots of protection and it's a very strong warrior spirit, it also encourages us just to slow down and go inwards. And whenever I take my nettle essence, the first thing that happens is I go to a no-mind space, very much a sort of, you know, Buddhist sense of emptiness almost. And from that space, particularly also working with dandelion, everything slows down and everything becomes much more kind of focused in the way that it needs to. But also when we're in that place with no chatter, we start to get the inspirational thoughts that are perhaps more coming from our higher mind and more in accordance with our destiny and our fate.
Yeah, we are going to be running out of time, unfortunately, very soon. What I would like to ask is this. Are people taking the essences, the tinctures, teas, are they imbibing, you know, the energy of these plants as they're going through the immersion and then being supported by other things that you're doing?
Exactly. So just to bring that to a final place of conclusion, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sandie, for reminding me to say that. So with the immersions, there's a strong emphasis to source your own medicine. Better to go out and forage it if you can. Like now, nettles are up and they're out. If not, we have our global contacts where you can get essences and tinctures from. But the idea is that the putting or imbibing of the medicine in is like getting the telephone number for the medicine. And the idea of the immersions through a series of transmissions with myself and many other teachers is that we start to paint the landscape or the gestalt, or we can say the personality of the plant itself. And so the combination of inviting the medicine in through the essences, which is really really important. If we understand that when we want angelic beings to come, we have to invite them in. It's the same with the plant beings. And if we trust them to do their work fully, then we can really start to kick on and see a lot of big growth and a lot of releasing also, but a lot of evolutionary development in our soul journey.
So let me ask you a really basic question. You know, I am taking dandelion essence.
Me too.
You know, how long should I take it for and what can I expect?
Well, a lot of people ask me about this, and I often say, be super intuitive. I carry my dandelion essence around with me in my pocket. At the moment, it's one of my favorite medicines. And if I feel like I need it, if I need some sort of momentary inspiration or something to happen to come in, I take some dandelion essence. Right now, I'm also taking nettle essence because of the preparation for this immersion that we're running at Quantum Plant Healing. And so I often have a little man bag, you can say, with medicines in. And I just say to people, if you have one of these, a pendulum, start dowsing on it, and you can tailor yourself. How many drops dandelion do I need in the morning? How many do I need at lunchtime? How many in the evening? And for how long? So be intuitive, empower yourself with a pendulum. Or if you don't have any of that, 3 drops 3 times a day for 3 weeks is a great place to start with an essence protocol.
And it's really, what you're really saying is engage.
Yes.
Don't just take it as something that is coming to you, you know, and it's going to work all on its own without any interference from you. It is a co-creative process.
Right. And also, you know, because we still have this dandelion immersion, and because dandelion is the, I guess you could say, the architect for the New Earth way of being, we'd like to offer your audience a special coupon over on the Quantum Plant Healing website. If you type in DAND, D-A-N-D 33, then you will be able to get a temporary 33% discount off the dandelion immersion, which makes it very, very affordable. And it's really the best place to start, because dandelion gets us into this mode of thinking, which is what we just talked about, which is being aware, seeing what is going on around you. And then you might be quite surprised how dandelion starts to talk to you. It's like, did you see that? Did you see how I linked this? Did you see how that's connected? Sometimes you'll see a billboard with a message. Sometimes a message will appear on your screen. Sometimes maybe an animal will pass by. And all of it, that, you know, I often say that whatever information we need about anything, because of fractal nature, is always, always in the terrain around us. We just have to be present and aware enough to be able to receive the intel.
The thing that I find with dandelion is it always brings a smile to my face.
Yes, that too.
Always. I don't know why. It just makes me want to smile. But hey, we've got to leave it there, unfortunately. I wish we could really dive into this. I mean, so many people have done a lot of energetic work. They've done their Reiki healing. I think the plants are here are like a next step, you know, to really take us deeper and engage really closely, you know, with nature.
Absolutely. And as a final invitation, I'd like to invite your audience to join us at quantumplanthealing.com. We do have different levels of membership, but we have a very basic members group, which is free to join. We have a nice community. We do free live calls. We share hints and tips and techniques and all kinds of other things. And not only that, it's just a space where like-minded people are able to gather and talk freely about many things that maybe are not so easy to talk about in general situations with the wider public.
Thank you for that, Davyd, and thank you so much for joining us today and for the work you're doing.
Thank you for the invite, Sandie. As always, I love our conversations. And
me too.
Thank you again.
Me too. Okay, so if you want to know more, visit quantumplanthealing.com. You can also check out Davyd's YouTube channel, Wisdom Hub TV. Lots of great videos there. And, you know, he really does cover everything, you know, the magic, the alchemy, astrology, you name it, it is there. So plenty to keep you going. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What Is Going On. And until then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you to Davyd Farrell.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you again.